Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of Sketch Support. If you are a new viewer, what this series is about is I take one sketch and then show you multiple layout examples, all based on that same sketch, with each layout looking completely different. Throughout the video, I break down how and why I altered the sketch to fit the photos and the theme that I was creating with. I also throw in some design tips and tricks that I like to use when I'm creating my layouts. If you enjoy Sketch Support, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. The best part of Sketch Support is that I've got a new free one-page sketch for you to download. The link for that at Scrapbook Generation is down below. I'm also running another challenge and giveaway, so the details for that are at the end of the video, and then you'll find the link for that down below as well. Last month, there were so many great layouts shared. I love getting to see how you guys interpret the sketch and the extra details and changes you come up with. You guys are so creative and clever and came up with so many ideas that I never would have thought to do. I love that we can learn from each other. I think that's one of the greatest things about the scrapbooking community is sharing our pages with each other. I gotta tell you guys, I went a little crazy this month with the sketch, and instead of creating the usual 3 to 4 layouts, I made 6. So we really don't have time to waste. Grab a snack, a drink, get comfortable, and let's get this started. First up, let's take a look at the sketch that I used as the starting point for each layout in this video. The main elements on the sketch are the 3 4x6 photos going across the layout, and then the 2 groupings of circles above and below the photos. Usually I create 3 to 4 layouts for Sketch Support, but sometimes a sketch just speaks to me and I get so many ideas on how to play around with it that I end up creating more. When I pick or create a sketch for Sketch Support, the first thing I do is go through my photos. I have a box that sits on my table that is full of photos that I have bulk printed. I like having photos on hand that I can just grab and create with right away. As I'm going through my photos with a sketch in mind, I pull out the photos that I feel might work with the sketch and then narrow it down from there. Most of the time when I'm creating for Sketch Support, I am working with what I have on hand and making it work with the sketch. Typically, I look at a couple of things in regards to the photos on the sketch. Can I substitute a couple of smaller photos in place of one larger photo? Can I use a larger photo in place of a few smaller photos? Can I flip a vertical photo to a horizontal photo? Can I use square photos instead? There are so many ways you can adjust your photos to make them work with the sketch. You don't always have to use the exact photos you see on the sketch. You can make any sketch work with almost any set of photos. After I have my photos somewhat narrowed down, I start writing out some different notes of different things I can do to the sketch to help match my photos or complement my photos. I look at the theme I want to focus on and try to think about ways I can incorporate it into the design of the sketch. I also look at the main design and see how I might need to adjust it to fit a different size of photos. And then lastly, I look at certain elements and think about ways I can change them to get a different look. Can I break up one large strip into multiple smaller strips? Can I remove elements? Can I pull one area or element from the sketch and just use that? Can I add a background? Can I flip the sketch? Can I rotate the sketch? There are so many ways you can change things up to fit what you want to use. I highly recommend that you try to do this sometime. Pick a sketch, any sketch. We have lots of free sketches and sketch bundles and ebooks at scrapbookgeneration.com, and use that sketch to try to create multiple layouts that look completely different. It can help you think outside of the box. It's like exercise for the creative side of your brain. I think sometimes people think that using sketches means you're not being creative, but I feel like using sketches makes me more creative. When you're using sketches, the hard part of scrapbooking, figuring out the design of your layout, is done for you, and you can spend more time having fun and playing and stretching your creative abilities. Before I jump into the layout, I want to share some tips for creating the circle clusters that you see on the sketch. I think the cluster of circles ended up being what made me really enjoy this sketch, and a large part of the ideas that I had for the 6 different layouts I'm sharing came from that grouping of circles. Circles can be such a fun shape to work with and layer together. I feel like they're one of the easiest shapes to use to create cluster designs like this because they are such a simple shape. No matter what part you might cover up, you can still tell that it's a circle. That means that it's really, really hard to mess it up. Other shapes can be a little more difficult because you have to be careful not to cover up too much or you kind of lose what that shape is. With that said, there are some tips that can help you create eye-catching circle clusters. You'll see that I use these tips throughout the video on all of my layouts. The first one is to use a variety of sizes of circles. I typically like to use one large circle, a couple of medium circles, several small circles, and then fill in some areas with tiny circles. Sometimes I'll add in some rings as well. An easy way to make rings is to use 2 punches in 2 different sizes. You punch the smaller circle first, then place the larger punch around the punched hole to punch out your ring. Number 2, use a variety of textures. Try mixing patterned paper, cardstock, chipboard, stickers, watercolors, hand stitching, sequins, buttons, enamel dots, or Nuvo drops. There are a lot of products out there that are already circle shaped or ones that you can easily create a circle shape from. Number 3, layer some smaller circles on top of larger circles. I like to use a large circle as a frame or a mat for smaller circles. Number 4, use a variety of colors and patterns. And when layering on top of other circles, make sure you are pairing colors and patterns that are in contrast of each other. A dark on a light or a subtle pattern on a more crazy or busy pattern. Number 5, use foam adhesive to adhere some of your circles. Adding dimension can help pieces stand out among all the other circles. Anytime I'm creating a layered design with a lot of elements, I like to use foam adhesive here and there. And the last tip is to mix in some other shapes that fit your theme. I added some stars and these little gear pieces to the layout. You could also add hearts and flowers and butterflies, arrows, snowflakes, any other embellishment that matches your theme. For layout number 1, I made quite a few changes to accommodate the pictures that I wanted to use. The first change I made was to fit my horizontal photos. To do that, I rotated the sketch to the right so that the photos are going from top to bottom instead of side to side like the vertical photos on the sketch. Something I do want to point out, another option I could have went with using 2 6x4" photos would be to use them going across the layout from the left edge to the right edge. So one photo here and the second photo here, like the photos on the sketch, and then keep everything else the same. I didn't do that partially because of my journaling, and I liked the look of this sketch rotated, and I kind of wanted to play around with that. If you really want to get some mileage out of a sketch, try rotating it to each side and creating a layout from each angle. A lot of times you can follow the sketch exactly, but rotated and end up with 4 completely different looks. The next change I made was flipping the sketch so the elements on the left would be on the right. I did this because in this middle picture, Drew has his head turned and looking off to the right. If I hadn't flipped this design, this photo would be more over here towards the right, and it just didn't look right to have him so close to the right side while looking off the right side of the layout. The circle photo, he's kind of looking off to the right as well, but it's not near as much, so I can live with it. You can't always avoid that, especially on a one-page layout. I just try to avoid it when I can. The way I see it is when the subject is looking off the layout, it's pulling the viewer's attention off the layout, and that's the opposite of what you want to do. You want to pull their attention onto the layout. When it came to my journaling, I had a lot to say, so I didn't think it was going to be able to fit in the journaling space on the sketch. This was a partial reason of why I rotated the sketch instead of using two 6x4 photos going across. Rotating it gave me the opportunity to use one of the 4x6 spaces for a larger journaling block. For the circle cluster, I didn't follow the design exactly as it is on the sketch. Mine ended up being a little longer. Part of the reason for that is that I used this circle design to help fill in some of the area where the title is on the sketch. Since I rotated the sketch, I wanted to figure out a different placement for my title so it wasn't sideways and reading up and down. Instead, I have my title partially above the photo and then partially below the photo. When I am creating a cluster like this, I will gather materials that I might want to use and then lay them out and see what arrangement I like before I start gluing anything down. I would generally start with placing my largest circle first and then build around that. You're also going to get a different look depending on what you are using. If you're using a die cutting machine like a Silhouette or a Cricut or punches, it's easier to copy the exact design. If you're using pre-made embellishments, you might not have circles or pieces that fit the exact size as it is on the sketch, but that's always an easy adjustment to deal with. On the left side, I used a smaller photo in place of the journaling circle. And then to embellishment around it, I used the same details that you see in the bigger cluster. I have some gears, some stars, a word sticker, and little dots of watercolor. So it kind of mimics the same design on both sides. For the second layout, I took the 4-photo sketch and transformed it into a 9-photo layout. You would think adding that many more photos would have required a lot of changes, but really it stays fairly close to the sketch. An easy way to include more photos is to use 2 or more smaller photos in place of one larger photo. As long as the combined height and width of the smaller photos is close to the height and width of the larger photo, you most likely won't have to make major adjustments. I used 8 2.5 by 3.5 photos in place of the 3 4x6 photos. The height of the combined photos, top to bottom, is 7 inches, which is only 1 inch taller than the photos on the sketch. If you split it evenly, that's only an extra 1/2 inch on the bottom and a 1/2 inch on the top, and that's really not a lot. Usually you can get away with a little extra here and there without it altering too much else on the layout. Another change I made to the photos is I arranged them in a more messy pattern instead of the straight line of photos you see on the sketch. With this silly way that Jackson was running, I thought the tilting and overlapping added a more fun and free look to match the theme and the photos on my layout. I also added in a few cards to replace a few photos. With the photos I used, they didn't fit across the page in the same way they do on the sketch, and I still wanted that look. So I would have needed 10 photos to make that happen. A quick and easy solution was to add in some cards to fill in that empty space. To help balance it all, I used one card on the far right as a decorative element. I used another card for my journaling, and then I used a third as a photo mat. Anytime you don't have enough photos to fill a space, you can always use a card, a piece of pattern paper, or an embellishment to fill it out. The first time I looked at the sketch and considered replacing the circles with a different shape, my thoughts immediately went to stars. I think it's probably because I'm a mom of boys and that's kind of my go-to boy shape, so I use it often. I ended up using stars that are slightly smaller than the circles on the sketch. Taking an extra inch with the photos, plus using smaller photos with less empty space in them left me with less room for that cluster design. With larger photos, I can get away with overlapping the cluster on top of the photo quite a bit, but with the smaller photos, not so much. So I tried to strategically place the photo with the most space in this area so that I could overlap the stars some without covering up Jackson. I decided to remove this horizontal strip at the bottom of the photos on the sketch. With the smaller cluster and the extra inch added in the photo section, I wanted to use something smaller instead. My idea was to create a pattern with watercolors and then add in a few arrow strips on top of that. I've really been enjoying watercolors lately, and I play around with a lot of different ways to apply them to my layouts. So to create this messy pattern, I applied watercolor in 3 different ways. The first is with a Q-tip. This is one of my favorite ways to use watercolors. You can create some really cool patterns and designs this way, and it creates an almost perfect circle when you stamp the Q-tip. The second way I used watercolors was by getting a little bit on the end of a small brush and just adding a little dot here and there. The third way was by lightly dipping a small scrunched up piece of paper towel into some watercolor and then dabbing it onto the paper. Sometimes it's just fun to play and experiment and learn how to use a product in different ways. I was really happy with the way this turned out. Layout 3 to me was just all about having fun with this sketch and those circles. I decided to take that circle cluster and bring it to an extreme level with it being the main design of my layout. This is a little off subject of the sketch in this layout, but anytime I feel like I'm in a rut or a creative block, I turn to circles. I will create a layout mainly made up of circles. I don't know why, if it's the change from everything being so straight lined and even, or maybe it just kind of breaks into that inner child. There's just something fun about circles that always seems to push me out of a creative stall. You should definitely try it if you ever feel like you're creatively stuck. So back to this layout. Because I wanted to create a giant cluster of circles, I removed the 4x6 photos going across the layout. I really wanted to have this huge circle design going up the page, and I wanted all of my photos to be included in that circle design. Sometimes we joke around about how cutting photos into shapes is a thing of the past, but I don't think it has to be. Cutting your photos into shapes can help highlight a favorite photo and really make it stand out. Plus, it's just kind of fun to do and mix it up every once in a while. To build this circle design, I figured out which photo I wanted to highlight the most and made that photo the largest of the circles. It's a 3-inch photo with a 3 3/4-inch circle behind it. I knew I wanted that photo to be near the center of the layout and the center of all the other photos to help it stand out. For the remaining 3 photos, I used 2.5-inch photos with a 3 1/4-inch circle behind it. I've had a lot of people online ask how I cut my photos into circles. For the smaller ones, the 2.5-inch photos, I used a punch for that. With a punch, you can flip it upside down so you can see what you are punching out and get your photo perfectly lined up within the circle. For the largest photo, the 3-inch one, I didn't have a punch that big, and I was really afraid to try to cut it on my silhouette because this was cut out of a 3x4-inch photo, and since I was wanting a 3-inch circle, I needed that cut to be 100% perfect. There was zero room for error. I had cut a lot of cardstock circles on my silhouette, including a 3-inch one, so I used that cutout frame that's left on the cardstock as my template to trace around the photo, and then I hand cut it. with the cutout, I could place it on top of my photo and see exactly what was in frame of the circle. Hand cutting isn't usually my go-to choice, especially with a circle, but it all worked out good. A little trick I use when I hand cut a shape like a circle, if I see a spot that isn't as good of a cut or smooth, I'll use a nail file and just lightly sand the edges to remove any spots that don't look uniform with the shape. You can usually fix a not so perfect shape that way. When arranging designs like this, I always start by arranging the larger circles first. So with this layout, that is the 4 photo circles. I think that's the easiest way to build a large cluster, by using those large circles to build a base design, and then you can fill in what you need around that. Once I was happy with the arrangement of those circles with the photos, then I started filling in the rest. So when I adhered the circles with the photos on them, I only added adhesive to the center. That way I can just lightly lift up the side and then tuck a smaller circle underneath it. I knew I was going to add stitching around the edges of the circle, so it was okay to only have adhesive in the center because the stitching was going to secure those edges. I still used the horizontal strip on the sketch, but I did move it up a little bit. Because I was making such a large circle cluster, and because I had removed the 4x6 inch photos, I wanted the strip to be a little closer to the center of the layout. I decided to kind of align it with the larger circle photo. It's a good way to bring attention to that photo. If you look at the sketch, the circle photo is placed on top of the horizontal strip. So I kind of mimicked that with my design on this layout. I did add a few extra strips to the edges of the horizontal strip. Because I had so much open space, there was plenty of room to add a little more without having to adjust anything. One thing I really love about this boy collection from Simple Stories is how it pairs bright and bold colors with black and white. I absolutely love that combination. So I wanted to incorporate that combination into that horizontal strip by having this brightly colored large stripe strip with some smaller black and white strips to accent it. When I eliminated the 4x6 inch photos and let this circle design take over, I lost the area where my journaling block was supposed to be, and I didn't want it floating up here all by itself. So my solution was to add it just above the horizontal strip. A lot of times I like to keep the important elements grouped together or close to something that will help bring attention to it. I thought bringing that journaling in close to the photos and the title was a good way to bring all of those important elements together. The last change I made was adding a large background. With so much white space on this layout, I liked the look of having a subtle pattern frame around the layout. To me, it kept that white space from being too overwhelming. And don't get me wrong, I love white space. I just wanted to have a balance of busy and calm, and I felt like this background gave it that balance that it needed. Have you ever seen the image that is called the creative process? I've seen and saved it on Pinterest. It's got a list of how the creative process goes. It's number 1, this is awesome. Number 2, this is tricky. Number 3, this is crap. Number 4, I am crap. Number 5, this might be okay. Number 6, this is awesome. This is the exact range of emotions I went through with this layout. I had an idea in my head and it just didn't quite come out the way I had planned. I kept trying to adjust to the ideas as they came to me, and it was an absolute roller coaster. The end result ended up being fun, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. I think more than anything, I really enjoyed this color combination of this red and a bright greenish yellow, teal, and then black and white. For this layout, in regards to the sketch, I I guess you could say it's kind of a reversal. I shrunk the photos and then enlarged the circles, and it ended up creating a completely different look from the sketch. I had these 3 photos that I really wanted to use with this design, but they were all quite a bit smaller than the 4x6" photos on the sketch. However, they were vertical photos, just like the photos on the sketch. I didn't have enough of them to fill the same space as the photos on the sketch, but I thought maybe I can shrink everything else on the sketch to match my photos. Now, that was the initial plan, but this layout just really kind of took on a life of its own. Even though that's not what I ended up doing, keep that in mind when using sketches. Try shrinking your photos while still using a similar photo ratio and the same orientation as the photos on the sketch, and then shrink everything else to fit, and you'll get a drastically different looking layout. Another way I changed my photos is I arranged them so that they are overlapping and tilted instead of straight like the photos on the sketch. This is kind of my go-to arrangement when I have 3 smaller photos. I don't know why, I just like that look. When it came to the circle design, I really wanted to create these unique circles made out of a droplet shape to mimic the splash of the water in the photos. I ended up making them quite a bit bigger than the circles on the sketch, but because I'd used small photos, I had plenty of extra space to do that. I used my silhouette to design 2 large droplet circles and position them so that they would be cut on a sheet of cardstock where I wanted the designs to be on my layout. One at the bottom of the photos and one at the top of the photos. Instead of trying to use all of those tiny droplets and arrange them on my layout, I took the easy way and used the cutout piece as my layout base, so this white sheet here, and then just placed a piece of colored paper on the back side that would show through these droplet cutouts. With the droplet design, I was trying to take a different approach to creating circles by not using actual circles, but instead use a different shape to create a circle. I also cut out these splat designs. They too have that circle shape without being an actual circle. It can be amazing how a tiny change like that can change the look of everything, and it's fun to kind of customize elements like that to fit the theme of your layout. You can find lots of shapes that still resemble a circle. Snowflakes, tires, flowers, bubbles, pumpkins. There's a lot of different designs and themes you could work into a circle design. I added lots of extra details to the circles. I used foam adhesive to adhere some of the cutout droplets. I added Nuvo drops in several colors to create little dots throughout the design. I also spread out some Nuvo glitter drops to cover a few of the droplets with glitter. I also used some watercolors to create tiny drops throughout the design. I removed the horizontal strip. I had so much going on with the droplets and splats, and I just didn't see a horizontal strip fitting in with this design. Removing strips and other elements on a sketch is always an easy solution if you want to get a more clean look. Clearly that was not the case for my layout. I had too much going on and didn't want to overwhelm the design. I also removed the circle photo on the sketch. I only had 3 photos for this layout, so instead of putting a circle photo on my layout, I used that space for my title. It actually worked out kind of perfect since I had removed that horizontal strip, which is where the title was on the sketch, and I love it when things work out like that. It is Sketch Support tradition to show how you can take a 1-page sketch and turn it into a 2-page layout. I never let the size of a sketch determine the size of my layout. There are so many ways to extend a 1-page sketch to work on a 2-page layout. Since the photos on this sketch are arranged in a straight line from left edge to right edge, extending this sketch was really easy. All I had to do was continue the line of photos from the left edge of the left page to the right edge of the right page. I switched out the 4x6 photos for 3x5 photos. One of my favorite photo sizes to use are 3x5 photos. What I like about them is that they aren't that much smaller than a 4x6 photo, so I can usually crop them from a 4x6 print, which always just makes life easier when you can do that. The best part is that 3x5 photos still fit evenly on a 12x12 paper like the 4x6 photos do. And the big bonus is you can squeeze in an extra photo. So with 4x6 photos, you can only fit 3 photos across a 12x12 page. With 3x5 photos, you can fit 4. Or in the case of a 2-page layout, you can fit 8 across. And that's a lot of pictures. For those of us that have tons of photos and want to include more, this is one of the best alternatives to using 4x6 photos. I ended up using a large photo to highlight one of my favorite photos in this bunch. This sketch gave me an easy opportunity to include a large photo. Since I had used 3x5 photos, I could remove 2 and add a 5x7 photo with a 6x8 mat to fill in that space. An enlargement and a large mat really makes this photo stand out. When it came to the horizontal strip on the sketch, it's just the one strip below the photos. For my layout, I had the idea that it might be really cute to create a road along the bottom and add some car stickers driving on that road. Then I thought to balance that, I could create a sky above my photos. Since my 6x8 photo mat is taller than the 3x5 photos and sticks out above and below those photos, I thought I would fill in that space with my strips to kind of complete this whole block of elements. To do that, I added a 1.5 plaid strip above and below the photos. On top of that, I added a road strip on the bottom and then my cloud and sky strip on the top. To finish, I added a stripe strip above and below everything. With designs like this, I like adding that stripe strip to kind of frame it all in. For the circle clusters on this layout, I chose to mix them up a little to help tie them to the theme and design of my layout. I used tire die cuts to create my little cluster of circles on the bottom of the left page. I also added in my title, some word bubble stickers, and some stars. On the top right page, I included my journaling block, some stars, some clouds, and a plain sticker to complete that themed scene on my layout. Even though this is a 2-page layout, it still follows pretty close to the sketch. If you look at the sketch and stretch it on 2 pages, you can see that my bottom grouping of circles and the title fall close to the same area as it is on the sketch. And if you look at the top grouping of clouds and my journaling, they fall close to the same area of the top cluster of circles on the sketch. When it comes to being creative, you have to be willing to venture out of your comfort zone every once in a while. And I think it's good if we try something a little different than what we would usually do. And that's the approach I tried to take with this layout. Every year we travel to Destin, Florida, and it is one of my absolute favorite places in the whole world. The water is so beautiful and the clarity underwater is amazing. Sometimes it's almost scary how far you can see into nothing. Every time we go there, I end up with the most amazing photos because of the color and clarity of the water. And I usually take over 1,000 photos a day because I just can't get enough of it. I've always wanted to experiment with using a full 12x12 photo as the base of my layout, and I figured one of these Destin photos with the beautiful water would be a good photo for that. Because it's the base of the whole layout, I used a photo that has lots of empty space so that I could add the cluster title and my journaling on top of it. Since Jackson is swimming at the bottom of my layout, I moved the cluster and the horizontal strip to the top side of the layout. When I first started planning the layouts I wanted to create with this sketch, I knew right away that I wanted to do something water, ocean, or swimming related. That's one of my favorite themes to scrapbook because for some reason I love creating splashes and finding different ways to create them. And I immediately had the idea to create a large splash and wave look. I kept one circle as a home for my title and journaling, and then I surrounded it with these die-cut droplets to create my splashes. To help them stand out, I added hand stitching to some and then Nouveau glitter drops to others. I also used foam adhesive to give some dimension. It's just that little extra pop that helps them stand out. In place of the horizontal strip, I used a bunch of die-cut waves. I used 4 different colors of paper and overlapped and intertwined them across the layout. It still serves a similar look as the strip. The only difference is that it's paired to support the theme of my layout. You can play around with many different decorative pieces in place of the horizontal strips. Things like chevron, scallop, squares, or even small vertical strips would work too. To complete the look, I used several different types of Nouveau drops to add some more splash detail to this whole cluster. And let me tell you, Nouveau jewel drops are absolutely amazing for water themed layouts. My favorite colors are Sea Breeze and Aqua Plains because they look exactly like water drops when they dry. Definitely one of my go-to recommended products for water design. Well, this wraps up the layouts for Sketch Support episode 3 and brings us to the Sketch Support challenge. The challenge is to use the free sketch I've used in this video as inspiration to create your own layout. There will be a Sketch Support challenge post on my Facebook page that will be pinned at the top of the page, and I'll link to that below so that you can find it. After you create your layout, you go to that post and in the comments post a picture of your layout. The fun part for me is that I get to admire all of your creations. I very much enjoyed seeing what was created during the last challenge. The fun part for you is that I will randomly select one person to receive $30 of downloadable sketches. I'll let you choose which ones you want. That way you can mix and match and pick out whichever ones you want in case you already have some. You can also pick out classes or ebooks. I'll leave that option completely up to you. You'll have a month to complete a layout and post it on the Sketch Support Challenge post on Facebook. Then on May 25th, I'll announce the winner. So go grab the sketch from scrapbookgeneration.com and get to creating because I can't wait to see what you guys do with this sketch. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share, and I'll see you guys next time.